First grade mathematicians, how are you doing today? I hope you had an awesome spring break. And today we actually get to launch a brand new math unit about time. And believe it or not, I bet you can believe it because you guys are the smartest first graders ever. You already know a lot about time. You actually use time words all the time. See what I did there? And you probably don't even realize it. Like you might say something like, this morning for breakfast, I had cereal. When you said morning, you were actually talking about a time. I bet you say this one a lot during these e-learning days. I can ask your mom to see. But you might say something like, when can I have a snack? You're asking about a time that you're able to have a snack. Well, this week, that's exactly what we're going to be doing. Why don't you go ahead and say this with me? We can tell time in different ways. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing. When I think about time, I think about a specific time. I think about two ways to tell that time. The one that you're probably most familiar with, like if you press your parent's phone on, or even if you press the home button on your iPad and these numbers pop up, we would call that digital time, where first we read the hour, then there's a colon, and then we see the minutes after this. If I were to read this digital time, it would say 12:30. But the other one, if you can think back to what our classroom looks like, I know you haven't seen it for a really long time, but our clocks above the door are a different way that we can tell time, and we would call that an analog clock. I say it, now I want you to say it. Analog clock. Analog clock. Awesome job. And what you notice about this clock is that it actually has two hands. It might be hard to see in this picture, but the hands are actually two different colors. We have black at the top, and then we have red at the bottom. The short hand on an analog clock is what we call the hour hand. That's what we read first when we're looking at an analog clock, the hour hand. The longer hand on a clock is called the minute hand. Guys, sometimes this can actually be really hard and confusing to remember the difference between the two. So I've always taught my first grade friends this in the past, where if I look at the word hour and I look at the word minute, hour is a shorter word, so the hand is shorter, and minute is a longer word, so that's the longer hand. I also want you to think about this. I'm going to show you this clock that I have that you've probably seen in your classroom before. Remember, our hour hand is shorter and our minute hand is longer. Now, this is a really cool clock because the minute hand is blue and the hour hand is red, but most of the time when you're looking at an analog clock, they're the same color, so it's harder to tell. But I want you to notice, I'm going to be spinning it on the back, and you're going to see the hour and the minute hand move. But your job as a mathematician and detective today is to figure out which one is moving faster. Are you ready? Oops, gotta move my hand. Which one was moving faster? Was it the hour hand, that's shorter, or was it the minute hand? I hope you said the minute hand because that's right. The minute hand is the hand on the clock that actually works the hardest. And when it comes all the way back up to the top, when it's pointing at the 12, it has just traveled all the way around the clock, which means 1 hour, and it is so exhausted by the time that minute hand reaches the 12, it says, oh, clock. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is that if I'm looking at an analog clock, I can read the time to the hour. So the way I do that is by first looking at that hour hand. Remember, hour hand is the shorter hand. And it's pointing at the 4. So first I would say 4. Then I notice that my minute hand is pointing to the 12. Sometimes first graders might say, oh, it's 4:12. But remember what trick I just told you. That the minute hand has to travel all the way around the clock, and when it gets up to that 12, it's going to say, oh, clock, because it's tired. So the way I would read this is 4 o'clock. So that's the analog time. Let me show you what that would look like in digital time. First, I'm going to look again at my hour hand, which is pointing to the 4. There are colons, like I showed you before. And to read o'clock digitally, it was actually 2 zeros, like you can think of the tens and the ones place. So this analog clock shows 4 o'clock, and here is its digital clock, 4 o'clock. let's try another one. Let's stop here. Remember that my job is going to be to look at the hour hand first. How do I tell the difference between the hour and the minute hand? And remember, the hour hand is shorter. So I'm going to look at our shorter hand, which is pointing to the 7. When I think about that minute hand pointing to the 12, I'm smarter than most mathematicians. So I'm going to say, I'm not going to say it's 7:12. That doesn't make any sense. I remember that that hour or that minute hand had to travel all the way around the clock. So now it's going to say 7 o'clock. This time on the analog clock says 7 o'clock. I can write that digitally by first writing 7 for my hour. I put my colon and then 00 for o'clock. Let's try one more together and then you're going to show me what you got. Let's look at this time. Remember, as a mathematician, I'm looking at that shorthand first. I'm noticing that that shorthand is pointing to the 9. So I'm going to say 9. Then I look at my minute hand, and I'm smarter than most mathematicians, so I know it's not 9:12. That doesn't make any sense. I have to think, what does the minute hand say once it's traveled all the way around the clock? Oh yeah, o'clock. So the time on this analog clock says 9 o'clock. And to write that digitally, I put 9 for my hour, my colon, and my 00. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a time on the clock, and it's going to be your job to pause the video and tell someone around you what the time is on that clock. What do you think? If you need a clue, remember you're looking at the hour hand first. The hour hand is the shorter hand. Pause this video and tell someone what time you think it is. If you said 11 o'clock, you are correct. And remember that the way that I would write that digitally is 11 colon 00 for o'clock. Awesome job. Well, today you're going to be proving to me what you know about telling time to the hour. There are a bunch of videos about telling time to the hour on YouTube. So if you still need some extra practice or some extra videos to teach you how to do that, just go ahead and look that up on YouTube with mom and dad's permission. But before you do your activity on Seesaw, where not only are you drawing the hands on the clock, but you're also writing those digital times, just like this is analog and this is digital, I do want to show you one really, really tricky time on the clock that sometimes first graders can get messed up with. If I look at this analog clock right now, it can be kind of confusing because I only really see one hand. And remember that there's always two hands on an analog clock. If I turn this to its side, it's kind of hard to see, but can you see that the red hour hand is actually behind there? Remember, when I'm reading an analog clock, I always want to look at the short hour hand first. So even though it's hard to see, if I pull this a little bit, you can see it there. That hour hand is pointing to 12 o'clock, right? Because that minute hand is also pointing at the 12. So I wanted to let you know that beforehand because I didn't want you to get tripped up if you had a question like that, because both of our hands would be facing the 12. So you got it. Show me what you got on Seesaw today. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Great job today, mathematicians.